What's up, YouTube? Welcome to Muscle Memory. My name is Malcolm, and today there's a legend here. There's a GOAT, all-timer, greatest interviewer to ever live. I'm not even talking about Joe Rogan. It's Chris Van Vliet. He's interviewed The Rock more times than there's pebbles on the street. Chris Van Vliet, how are you?
The greatest interview alive is here. Yeah. Oprah Winfrey is here.
Nah, it's just you, man.
Is she the greatest? Is it Larry King?
That's a good one.
The current GOAT, I think a lot of people would say it might be Joe Rogan. Like
I would say current days Joe Rogan, but like all time,
Howard Stern.
Howard Stern's a solid choice. I mean, for many reasons.
But the way that Howard Stern gets people to open up and tell stories about things they've never talked about, like that clip that keeps resurfacing of John Cena in his escapades back in the day. I'm nobody else would have got that out of John Cena but Howard Stern.
Dude, you've talked to John Cena a couple of times. Have you ever gotten anywhere close to talking about something like that with him?
I haven't, but that's something, I don't know. It's something I'd be interested to ask him about. I've interviewed him four times, 5 times.
That's a lot of times to interview someone that doesn't exist. I mean, that's kind of crazy.
It's difficult, right? Because you can't see him. You just hear this voice kind of comes out of nowhere.
Very deep voice too, a little intimidating. It's like, oh, hello, whatever.
What's funny is like the number one comment on every one of those videos is always like, why is there no one in the video? Or why is he talking to a chair? And every once in a while I'll pop in and just comment like, it's good practice. That's it.
You love to see it. Dude, you've interviewed so many people. Like, I don't want to say who's your favorite. I feel like that's such like an easy question, but like, who was the most like nerve-wracking interview you ever done?
I mean, I think the answer is the same for both of those questions, like favorite and most nerve-wracking, just because of what that person meant to me growing up. And it's The Rock. Like I was a huge wrestling fan during the Attitude Era, and The Rock was my guy. The Rock was the one that really brought me in. Like it was Austin McMahon that hooked me and made me go, oh, this is interesting. But it was seeing The Rock and that charisma that just oozed out of him is what made me go, yes. And I was like really impressionable at the time. Like I became a huge wrestling fan at like 15, 16, 17. That was the heart of the Attitude Era in the late 90s. So like, I'll think a lot of like who I became at that time was really influenced by The Rock. So like I would walk around my high school and I would ask people questions just so I could shout, it doesn't matter what you think. So the first time I talked to The Rock, fast forward like, 14 years after the it doesn't matter stuff in high school, I was interviewing The Rock. The Rock was at the top of my list of people that I wanted to interview. And I've been so fortunate to be able to travel the world and talk to, some of the biggest stars and some of the most influential people on the planet.
Oh yeah.
And The Rock was always the top of my list because of what he meant to me growing up. And I got him for the first time backstage at Raw as he was preparing for WrestleMania 28 with John Cena. So it wasn't just that I was getting The Rock, it's that I was getting The Rock on his own like home turf.
So like peak Rock.
I wasn't nervous to meet him. I was nervous because of what this meant to me. And I also knew what it would mean for like, the TV station I was working for at the time. I knew what it would mean for my fledgling, tiny, minuscule YouTube channel at the time. And I think I put a lot of pressure on myself. But the second The Rock walked in the room, he has this energy that just fills up the room. He's so kind to like everybody. He introduced himself like, hi, I'm Dwayne. Good to meet you. I'm Dwayne. Good to meet you. It's like, wow. Yes, we know who you are.
I went on your
everybody's hand, whether you were the reporter, the camera person, a makeup person. And it was so kind. He was so kind. And, I joke about this all the time, but now I've been able to interview The Rock 9 times. Not that I'm counting. I'm working, hopefully, on getting number 10 when he's promoting Black Adam. So
I was about to say, like, you better get 10. Like, you can't just come that close and then just not hit double digits. Like, it has to.
If you get 10, you got to get 20, right?
Exactly. If you get 20, you got to get 50. I mean, like, it's just a matter of time.
That's it.
That's so different, though. Like, because, like, obviously, we're from 2 different generations. So the first time I ever saw The Rock, it was for, like, Tooth Fairy. Like, I didn't know he wrestled. Nothing like that. But then I hear so many people like, oh yeah, I loved Rock and Austin growing up. I'm like, yeah, I liked it too. But I was 15 and I watched it on the network. So that's so different. Like,
what's so funny is there's a lot of Dwayne Johnson fans out there that have never seen The Rock wrestle. And I find that so fascinating. Same with John Cena too. Oh yeah. There's a lot of people who love John Cena, the actor, the character, and are not even familiar with his work other than You Can't See Me. And as wrestling fans, that's like mind blowing to think about.
Right. No, it's insane. Like there's so many different ways. Like people like a lot of my friends like they'll know about Batista, but not know that he wrestled. They're like, oh yeah, you mean like Drax, right? I'm like, I mean, yeah, but like the Batista bump, the machine guns, like, dude, why do you not know this? But there's so many different things we've been doing right now, Chris. And like one video that my friend and I, she has continued to watch so many times. At this point, I sent it to her. You got engaged recently. And it was a really good video. And like I was sitting on Instagram, I was scrolling through it, and she was sitting next to me. She was like, "Wait, watch that again." I'm like, "All right, we'll watch it again." I'm like, "Wait, go back, play it again." I'm like, "I can send this to you if you want. Like, you don't have to keep watching this on my phone." How nervous were you going into that? Because you've interviewed so many like stars, but this is like a very personal moment.
Yeah. And it was a personal moment that I knew we'd be sharing with everybody as well.
Yeah.
So like I wanted it to be perfect. I wanted to be perfect in like every way. And Rachel and I, my fiance, had been talking about this for a while, not about like where it would be or what it would be, but we knew we were going to get engaged and we know we're going to get married. So like that was a, very big adult conversation that I'm so glad that we had. And I was just kind of like, I want to make this special and I want to make this like really memorable so that when we look back on this in 1 year or 10 years or 60 years, we can go, man, what a special moment in a special place. So there's this place in Newport Beach, not far from where we live, that Rachel just loves. It's called the Back Bay. And she hikes there, walks there like 2 or 3 times a week. So I'm like, that's the spot. Like, I know it's a place that means so much, like deep in her heart. So my buddy Zeus, who shoots a lot of my videos, he's an incredible photographer and an incredible editor. I was like, could you be in on this? And he's like, absolutely. He lives like an hour and 15 minutes away from where we were doing the proposal.
Oh,
so
man.
He woke up at like 5 a.m, drove down. Obviously, Rachel knows what he looks like. So he was in disguise. He was wearing a big straw hat. He had the face shield pulled all the way up.
Oh,
and
no.
We had this plan of like, I'm like, I don't know exactly what time it's going to happen, but like somewhere between like 7:30 and 8.
Yeah.
And he's like, okay, great. So I like dropped a pin on the map and I like took photos. I'm like, look for this. And then when you see this, look for this thing over here. And we planned to meet. There was a restroom really close to where I was going to propose. So we met in the bathroom and I was a little ahead of schedule and he was a little behind schedule. So like I was walking into the bathroom area telling Rachel, like, I really got to go to the bathroom right now. I was walking in as he was also walking in. Went in the bathroom. He mic'd me up really quick and he's like, all right, so like, you ready? Let's do this. I'm like, yeah, let's do this. So like I walked out of the bathroom. About 10 seconds later, he walked out and then was like basically following us behind with the camera. And I was really nervous. I knew she was going to say yes.
Yeah, of course.
But it's just such a special, intimate moment. And that's one of those things that for the rest of our lives, that'll be one of like the top moments ever, right? Like that's one of those things that, for most people, you only do once. So
unless you like Ric Flair, it might be 12 times.
Or any number of, we can name many different people. But,
lots of people.
Yeah. But yeah, it was just a really special moment. And it went even better than I could have possibly imagined. And the way that it edited together, like really made us feel like it was representative of the moment that we shared.
It definitely was, because I think my friend is still watching that as we're talking right now. Like
every time,
I think she watched it 12 times by this point. Like,
every time we watch it, we cry.
Oh, I'm sure. I almost cried just watching it, man. I was like, oh my God. Allergies, whatever it is.
That's it. Yeah, someone cutting onions in here.
Stupid onions. I hate vegan food, but I feel like at your wedding you have like these all these celebrities and whatnot, because you talk to so many people. Who's like some of the like celebrities or wrestlers that you find yourselves like, all right, we're like actually kind of friends now? That's insane.
Like that I would invite to my wedding?
Maybe not invite to the wedding, but you're like, all right, I can like hang out with you.
It's interesting, like, especially after interviewing someone a handful of times or 10 times or something, that like, it's not strange to reach out to them. Like John Morrison called me last week. I'm trying to do a workout video with him and trying to figure out like the best timing. So it's not strange when his number pops up on my phone. So that was really cool. Like I interviewed Ken Anderson the other day.
Yeah.
He texted me like, thank you so much. Like really enjoyed the conversation. So like, that's another cool one. I've mentioned it a few times before, but Tyler Perry has been so kind to me for a good chunk of my career. And he was a big inspiration as to why I moved to LA. Like I've been thinking about it. I've been talking about it. And he said 2 words that it wasn't suck it, by the way. He said
He's
2
dressed
words.
as Medea saying that.
He said just 2 words that really inspired me. And it was just dream bigger. And
I mean, yeah, of course.
I remember we were chatting one day and he's like, what would you do right now? What would you change right now if you knew that you couldn't fail? And I'm like, that's such a great question. I'm like, but I actually don't think I can fail. Cause like, I don't believe that there's such thing as failure. It's either you win or you learn, right? You either win and you succeed, or you learn from your mistakes and you keep going. But he's just like, dream bigger. Like I jokingly was like, oh, I saw you had a reporter in one of your movies. Why didn't you call me? I'd be perfect for that. And he's like, come on, dream bigger. I'm like, oh, wow. Like, so that's someone that he's been really inspirational. And I mean, look what Tyler Perry has accomplished, especially considering how he grew up. And he's very open about that. But man, that's someone, there's just a few names there, but that's someone who's really inspired me.
Wow, I was not expecting Tyler Perry. I thought you were just gonna be like, oh yeah, Dolph Ziggler and Jeff
Dolph
Hardy
Ziggler, yeah. Dolph's been so kind to me as well. But yeah. You know who else, who's been really kind to me is, I know him as Eli Drake. Everybody knows him as Max Dupree. But like he invited me to his Halloween party last year before he moved away. He used to throw these epic Halloween parties at his apartment in Hollywood. And like it was cool being there with like a bunch of other wrestlers, but like that guy's been so great. Like I texted him the other day, like, dude, you're crushing it with this gimmick. And he's like, oh man, I really appreciate that. And then we went back and forth a little bit. So that's someone else who, yeah, look, it's just cool, man. Like I grew up as a big fan. So to be able to even share one text with anybody is going to me.
If you could have any wrestler join like Maximum Male Models, who would it be? We're talking about LA Knight or Max.
Wow. Like any of all time?
Anyone. I'm thinking like Bruno Sammartino, but that's just me.
The thing I love about a faction like that is I think that it really helps to step you up, right? Like Ethan Page spoke to me recently about how like, even when he's not in a match or he doesn't have like a lot of words to say in the promo, the fact that he still gets screen time is like really important. And I never thought about it that way. And I think that that's a really important thing when you're part of a faction, especially a really successful faction, is even if you're not working that night, even if you're not saying anything, you're still on camera and you're still getting that screen time. So man, who would be, I think it'd be really cool to see like Billy and Chuck in there. I think that they could really, elevate
that, I completely, I thought you were gonna say like Tyler Breeze. I was like, that's an easy
one. That's just the obvious choice. Like, come on.
It's
really interesting to go like someone who you would never expect, like someone who had like a deep, like dark character, and you put him in there.
Black.
What's that?
Aleister Black, easily, or Malachi. Yeah,
kind of like this may be too old of a reference for you, but when Tank Abbott joined 3 Count, I was like, that's weird, but I like it.
Sometimes it's the weird stuff that works sometimes, man. But like, I want to talk a little bit about like what you've done so far in this career of yours. I mean, like you've interviewed so many different celebrities, so many different wrestlers. Do you feel like going into like entertainment reporting helped you more into moving on into pro wrestling than it would be like just jumping straight into like, all right, let me just try to text Bobby Lashley and see what's happening?
Absolutely. And the pro wrestling interviews happened by accident as a result of being an entertainment reporter and a TV host. Like, I was so fortunate just a few years into my career to be hosting a TV show for MTV2 Canada. And like my second day on the job, I spent following around the rapper Chingy. Remember Chingy? Right?
Yeah. Yep.
So it went from like, it was Chingy and then a bunch of comedians and actors and directors. And then that's when I got my first interview with a wrestler. And it was just kind of me thinking outside the box a little bit. And I was like, oh my gosh, I think WWE is coming to town soon. Like, this is my way to kind of like have a chance to hang out with a wrestler and get paid. So I asked my boss, I'm like, could we interview a wrestler? She's like, yeah, we've done that before. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Like, it's happening. And yeah, it was Bobby Lashley. It was my first interview, 2007. He was the ECW champion at the time.
Wow. And
I just kind of used that, the fact that I was an entertainment reporter covering all aspects of entertainment, once a year, twice a year, when WWE or Impact or Ring of Honor came to town, I would just use it as my opportunity to get to talk to somebody. And dude, in the early 2010s, when Impact had some really big names, I got to talk to Jeff Hardy, and I got to talk to Jeff Jarrett, and like I got some really big people that came by, like that probably wouldn't have happened if I didn't have the leverage from being at a TV station. So it went from like 2 a year to like 3 or 4 a year. And then I'm like, well, if I'm going to WrestleMania, well, why not like capture, this was like WrestleMania 27 in Atlanta. Why not capture some interviews while I'm there? And then it was like Cody Rhodes and Dolph Ziggler. That was my first interviews with them. They're like the first wrestling interviews on my channel. If you go way back, you can find those. So I just kind of was like, wrestling is entertainment. Why not throw this in, interview with Tom Cruise here and Denzel here and Meryl Streep here and Frank Caliendo here. What about throwing in an interview with like Jack Swagger early on or Mick Foley early on? And dude, it's been so cool.
Yeah, and it's definitely been working out. And like, what's like the end goal in like having all these different interviews? Like, is it to go to the WWE? Is it to like sign with this major media organization? Like, what's like your end goal with everything that you're doing right now?
It might sound weird, but I don't feel like I have an end goal.
I mean, that's a good answer though.
Well, I think the thing is when you set like a big end goal and you accomplish it, it's like, well, then what's next? Then that couldn't have been the end goal if you've already accomplished it. So for me, I define success as being excited for what you're going to do that day and then being proud of what you've done at the end of that day. So for me, I just want to like every single day be proud and excited. And then hopefully that turns into every week and then every month and then every year. And I just want to keep progressing. Yeah. And I'm like super aware that content creation has changed a ton since I got into television in 2005 and radio in 2004. Like it's changed so much. It used to be that you had to work for a network. You had to work for ABC or Fox or NBC or CBS. Now you can do your own stuff. And you know this as well as anybody with a successful YouTube channel like you have. You can just put your own content out there and you can create your own story. So I love the fact that my podcast has a bunch of people that listen to it. The YouTube channels, which is so exciting. The Clips channel is doing really well now. I just love being able to share people's stories. Like that's the thing I've been interested in since day one is I am fascinated with the idea of storytelling. And I love the idea of like somebody who's maybe they've hit that end goal, or maybe they've accomplished that thing that a lot of people want to accomplish. I want to break down like how they got there. Like, how did you get to win a Super Bowl, or how did you get win a Grammy, or how did you win a WWE championship, or whatever, that happens to be? What were the stumbles along the way, and how can we learn from those?
Wow. Well, that was like the perfect answer. Wow. I'm so motivated by that. That was great. Chris, I want to play like a little bit. Intention.
I don't know.
No, it was amazing. Chris, I want to play like a little bit of a game. It's called Muscle Memory. Obviously, that's the name of the show. So I'm gonna ask you a few different questions about Canadian wrestling. I'll put your mind to the test to see how much you know about the business.
The answer is Bret Hart.
Bret Hart, Trish Stratus, Edge, all of them.
Okay, there you go.
So my first question is, who was the first ever Canadian that was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame? That might be a bit hard of a question, honestly. Say it out loud. Bret Hart.
Bret Hart?
Yeah. It was Pat Patterson and Killer Quality.
Oh, I always forget Pat Patterson's French Canadian.
Honestly, I forgot too. But him and Killer Quality went into the same class.
Look, I'm gonna get all of these wrong, by the way.
It's okay. I think the
answer to the next one's Bret Hart, though.
Yeah. So who's the most followed Canadian wrestler on Instagram?
Oh, wow.
I think it's a pretty obvious answer, but also
Edge?
It cannot be. You said Edge?
Yeah.
Try again. It's a really popular theme song.
Edge.
I mean, fair. Wrestles for Tony.
Sean Spears. No, it's definitely not the answer.
No.
Really popular theme song.
It rhymes with Moodus.
Oh, Chris Jericho. Jeez.
Yeah, Chris Jericho. He has 4.2 million. And then after him is actually Trish Stratus. And then it's Edge. But yeah, close enough. You almost got it. All right. So I realize this last question might actually be kind of hard. Who has the longest reigning who has the longest reigning Stampede North American Heavyweight Championship reign?
Stampede Wrestling?
Stampede Wrestling. You're Canadian.
Dynamite Kid?
That's actually not even a bad answer. It's British Bulldog, but like that's actually
okay. Yeah,
it's actually a solid answer. I I can see
Wow.
why.
Oh, for 3.
You tried. I mean, like, hey,
They're
we
going
learned
to be
a lot.
asking for my Canadian passport back.
They might be. I mean, I have no authority. I'm just from Virginia, so it's all good. I think you can still stay. But as we move on from this, I want to talk a little bit about like what it takes to like make it in wrestling media. Obviously, you've made it. I mean, you're like the top dog around here, man. But people like me are just trying to climb up the scene. What's like the goal of like when you first like get into the business? So you're like, all right, do I just start with local wrestlers or do I just interview? Like, do I just go straight to WWE? What's like the goal? Like, do I just, I don't know, ask John Cena for his number?
That's where it starts. Yeah.
Definitely.
I think the most important thing is to ask yourself why you're doing it. I think that that's where it begins. Why are you doing it? And then figure out where to go from there. If you're just doing it to hang out with wrestlers, that's okay. If you're trying to do this to become a journalist, or if you're trying to do this to make money, like I feel like your path is different based on those answers. But
For sure.
the most important thing is to start. Like, just start. You don't need the perfect name for your podcast. You don't need the perfect gear. And I think that people get hung up on all of the excuses and they don't just start. And I can guarantee you that wherever you live, there's an independent wrestling show within a few hours of where you live. So go out and interview literally anybody that will say yes and start from there and watch your stuff back. You're never going to get better if you don't watch your stuff back. And you're never going to get comfortable on camera if you don't watch your stuff back, because yes, you do look like that in the real world. And yes, I know you don't think so, but you do sound like that as well. So get comfortable with, yeah, you do that weird thing with your lips or your eyebrows when you talk. And yeah, you sound way different than you would expect. Get comfortable with seeing yourself on camera. Get comfortable with asking good questions. And most importantly, if it's about interviewing, listen, like just listen to the answers that are actually coming. Don't skip ahead to the next question or 3 questions from now. Be present in that moment. And that's probably the hardest thing to do, but just be present in that moment and be listening to what's happening so that it will inform the next question that you have.
Definitely. And like a lot of like your interviews are very conversational. How do people keep their interviews conversational with whoever the guest is?
I think don't overthink it. Like, yes, that person might be a pro wrestler or a comedian or an actor or director or a football player or someone that you look up to, but you also need to realize that they're also just a fellow human being who happens to be maybe a few steps ahead in their journey compared to where you're at. And I think the biggest thing is just talk to them like you would talk to anybody. And don't put them up on a pedestal. Just talk to them like you would talk to anybody. And also, like, don't be afraid to ask the questions that you're genuinely curious about. Whether you think it's going to sound silly or sound stupid, that's okay. And that's kind of where things really started to take off for me early on. It's just, I was always curious about whatever it happened to be. And I'd be like, I've always wondered, could I ask you this? And they're like, oh my gosh, sometimes that really lights them up.
Definitely. And I guess, like you said, ask questions that you're curious about. So I do have one bit of a heavy hitter as well. How do people not just like reach out to like these big companies, but actually secure interviews with people like in the WWE, AEW? And follow up to that as well. Have you ever been contacted to actually be hired by one of these companies?
Well, I think that to answer your first question, it's all about value. And I think that that's a really big thing that you should carry with you in all aspects of your life. What can you bring to this? And I think a lot of people, when they're asking guests to be on their show, it's all about like, what's in it for them? What's in it for me? Like, hey, will you be on my show? It'd be really great for me. Instead, it should be like, here's what I can do. Your time is super valuable. If you'd be willing to give me 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour of your time, here's how it could benefit you. And here's the trade-off. You're going to trade me your time for this value. So I think that's a really important thing. So I would say, like, I've interviewed this person, and this person, which hopefully you can make the jump from there to like, you could be that next person. And to answer your second question, yeah, I mean, I worked on the first few episodes of Dynamite. I was on the very first episode of Dynamite in Washington, D.C. And like, to be a tiny little part of that show is so incredibly cool. Like I interviewed Kevin Smith and Jason Mewes live in the audience. And that was just amazing that they asked me to be part of that. A few weeks later, I was on an episode live from Charleston, West Virginia. And I did a segment with the Rock and Roll Express that got interrupted by the very mean Santana and Ortiz, who threatened to hit me with a sock full of pennies or something.
Oh, man.
So, yeah, it was so cool to be there. Like, look, TNT hadn't had wrestling in almost 20 years. And for me to be like this tiny, like 1/1000th of that show was pretty awesome.
For sure, man. And I guess like as you wrap this up, you always end your interviews asking people like what they're grateful for. So I want to ask you that as well. What are you grateful for right now?
I love this question. And the reason that I ask this question is, number one, I'm curious, like what are they grateful for? But number two, I want people listening to go, wow, that person who's so insanely successful is grateful for a lot of the same things that I have.
Right.
Wow. And I think that I hope that it makes people go, wow, I should start to look at life through that lens instead. So I start and end every day with this. So thank you for asking this question. For me, it's health and health of all the people that are close to me. Number two, I'm grateful for those people that are close to me, my direct family and the people that I consider my family. I'm like so grateful just for the amazing people in my life. And number three, I'm just so grateful for opportunities. Like we live in a time now where you and I live on different sides of this country, and we're connecting right now, like we're sitting next to each other. And you can do this with people that live in other countries, and you're doing it in real time. And like, this has never existed in human history before. And I love that we can be so connected with all of these opportunities just by clicking a few buttons or tapping our screen. And I think that that's such a cool thing that's really being underutilized right now. And I'm so excited that it's even an option for us.
Wow, another perfect answer by Chris Van Vliet. Dude, where can I find you over social media if they're not already following you?
Well, look, if anybody's watching this on YouTube right now, I have two YouTube channels. One's just my name, Chris Van Vliet. The other one is CVV Clips, where we put the most memorable and entertaining clips from all the interviews on there. That channel is growing at this crazy rate, like 1,000 subscribers a day. So if you could go in there and subscribe to that channel, that'd be so awesome. And on social media, it's just my name, @Chris Van Vliet. So give me a follow there and join me on this journey.
Wow, you heard it here first from Chris Van Goat. This dude's amazing, dude. Like, it was so great having you on. I really appreciate it.
Triple M. Always good to talk to you.
Of course, guys, make sure to like, comment, share, and always subscribe. And we're out.